Hi again, this is Christine, the neuropsychologist in the Long COVID service. Today is the final session of the Brain Fog group. The aims of this video are to summarise what was discussed in the earlier sessions in regards to attention, memory and executive functions. So let's start by recapping attention. Attention was one of the earliest cognitive functions that we discussed, and it acts as an important foundation for the other cognitive functions. We discussed that attention difficulties are one of the cognitive hallmarks of brain fog. We talked about how attention refers to your ability to focus on certain information that's important or interesting, while at the same time filtering out any distractions. We discussed the 4 different types of attention: sustained attention, selective attention, divided attention, and alternating attention. We talked about the differences between these. For example, sustained attention involves focusing for a long period of time, whereas selective attention involves filtering out any distractions. We also talked about how we rely on the different types of attention in different situations and tasks, but they often overlap and work together. We know that attention is a limited resource. We can only pay attention to certain amounts of information for a certain length of time, which depends on the task, any distractions, and how you're feeling on the day. The more demands that we place on our attention, the more likely it is that we'll make an attentional error. Attention difficulties are diverse, and they can interfere with a variety of everyday tasks. Internal and external factors can interfere with our attention, so noise, other people, a lack of interest, or illness. There are many strategies that we can use to overcome difficulties with attention, and these strategies are generally aimed at minimizing these factors. Let's move on to memory now. We discussed how memory is the process of taking in information from the world around us, processing that information, storing it, and later recalling the information when we need it, even after a very long time in some cases. We talked about how attention is essential for good memory, and we discussed the stages involved in making a memory. So these were encoding, which is the process of taking in the information, processing that information, and the initial learning of information, where attention is really important. Storage, which is the stage concerned with preserving and storing information over time, which can be from minutes to decades. And retrieval of information, which is the final stage of memory and is involved in recovering information from storage when you need it. We also talked about how information is organised in long-term memory based on the type of information that's contained within the memory. This helps us to recall the information when we need it. The 2 main types of long-term memories that we talked about were explicit memories, which is conscious information. So this could be past events or knowledge about the world, and implicit or unconscious memory, which is information about how we do things, such as riding a bike. When we spoke about memory, we also discussed that forgetting is a normal part of memory, and many different factors interfere with memory. Some of the reasons that we discussed that can interfere with memory were fatigue, medication, depression, anxiety, stress, drugs and alcohol, pain, and age. We spoke about how memory problems can be improved by using different memory strategies. We spent a few sessions discussing these memory strategies and grouped them into internal and external strategies. We talked about how these strategies are not just for helping with problems with memory, but can be of benefit to all of us during our lives. The external strategies we talked about are tools and devices that help us support our memory. So these can be things like your smartphone, calendar, diary, or post-it notes. And the internal strategies we discussed were mental strategies, such as chunking, mnemonics, and using visual imagery. Finally, we discussed executive functions. You may remember that we described executive functions as the CEO of the brain, taking a role in coordination of the other mental processes that we discussed, such as attention and memory. The term executive functions is actually an umbrella term that we use, and it refers to a wide range of skills and abilities that are involved in all the tasks we perform day to day. These executive functions also play an important role in coordinating the way other cognitive functions work. The reason that we refer to executive functions as the CEO of the brain is due to the complex tasks that they are able to oversee and perform, and due to that role in coordinating those cognitive functions. We know that executive functions also have an important role in coordinating our social behaviour. We also spoke about some examples of executive functions. As a recap, a few of the examples that we discussed were the way executive functions oversee and adapt your thoughts, feelings as behaviours as needed, and change in relation to changing circumstance. How executive functions help us with problem solving, controlling and regulating our emotions, and help us with our social behaviour, so knowing how to act in different situations. We talked about how executive functions help us to do things in the right order and achieve our goals, such as making a recipe. We talked about how they guide our behaviour, and that there are lots of complex functions that our executive functions oversee. Now, under normal circumstances, our executive functions allow us to effortlessly perform very complex tasks all the time during our daily lives. We know that as well, simple tasks such as brushing your teeth do also rely on our executive functions. So that's a very brief recap of the information on cognitive functions we've discussed over the past few weeks. Attention acts as an important foundation for our cognitive skills. Memory helps us to recall information in the long term and short term and can be impacted by retention and concentration. And we talked about how executive functions act as the CEO of the brain and coordinate cognitive factors and oversee our behaviours. Thank you very much for attending the group. I hope you've enjoyed the sessions, and I hope you found the information from the group helpful.